Hi everyone, I wanted to speak to you for a little bit in this video about your final assignment. And in your final assignment, you're going to write a paper about a topic that has particularly intrigued you during the course. So in this video, I want to point out the actual requirements of the assignment, what I'm expecting, and some common writing issues to be aware of when writing a formal academic paper, and how you might approach writing your paper in a way that's helpful to you. When you go to submit your assignments and open the final paper assignment section, you will find three things there. First is some general information, which I've copied and pasted here. Have a look through this information and note particularly that your topic needs to consider gender in relationship to leadership and schooling. When you're thinking about your topic, you may not immediately see how your topic is related to leadership, but here's where you can consider as a leader in your school, whether in a formal or an informal capacity, having explored this particular topic by reading through the literature and so on, how might you address the issue through encouraging more equitable practices, for example? So that's where you can make the connection to leadership. So once you've chosen a general topic and done some reading and analysis of the topic, you'll be able to develop your thesis statement. That is, you will share with the reader a statement that usually comes around the last sentence of your introduction. So it might come right last, or it might come second last, or whatever, but it's right in near there. And your introduction might be 1 or 2 paragraphs, for example, and then at the end of that, you're going to introduce your thesis statement, where you state the main idea or issue related to your topic that you will be exploring in your paper. So for example, your topic may follow on your artifact assignment topic, where you explored the gender distribution or the gendered bifurcation of sports activities in your school. So that's your general topic. And then your thesis might be considering options for gendered organization of sports activities in the school, for example. So you're kind of taking a piece of that broader topic and looking at it in depth. You'll note as well that if you wish to speak with me further about your topic, and I talk about this later in this section, we can make arrangements to do so, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. In the second section of the information about the assignment, which again I've cut and pasted, you will find more specific information. First, you're encouraged to discuss your topic with me, but you're not required to do so. So you will know what your comfort level is with your choice, and based on that, just know that I'm available to discuss your topic with you, or anything else you want to discuss about your paper, and we can set up a time to do that. Note too that your paper will be approximately 8 to 10 pages long, double spaced, not counting the title page and the references. Again, I'm not necessarily counting pages, but I am looking at the way in which you use the space available to you to explore your topic completely. Your paper is not an opinion paper, so you'll need to support your claims with supportive references. So for example, if you make a claim like, boys often increase their capital with other boys by one-upmanship activities such as bullying, homophobic taunts, and aggressive physicality, I've made a claim. Now, how might I support that claim? Well, I could use a specific quote from Taggart, for example, along with a citation, or simply cite the book or a section of the book. You will certainly be able to draw on literature from our course as sources, and I encourage you to do so. However, you will need to get a broader view of your topic and thesis than that, and so you can find those resources that you need using the search engines in the library. Now, I know there are things available to you like Google searches, for example, but they're not going to be reliably helpful to you as the literature searches are in the library. They're not vetted as rigorously. So by using sources from the library, you can be more sure of the reliability of your sources. You can also use the chat function on the library page to ask for help for finding resources or ideas for keywords and looking for doing your search and so on. And they're extraordinarily helpful. So don't ever hesitate to ask for their help. Or if you live nearby, you can actually probably go to the library now. I'm pretty sure it's open to students now. Before you write your paper, it's also a good idea to be very clear about the kinds of things I'll be looking for as laid out in the rubric, and I've included that here. So let's explore them a bit. You'll notice that there are 4 categories of marks, and within each category, each one has similar kind of subcategories or things specific things I'm looking for, and with a kind of gradation of descriptors. So for example, in the 27 to 30 category, and that's the number of marks that are available in this category, excellent and very appear in the first category quite often. And as you move down, the descriptors change somewhat. So excellent may turn to very good, for example. It appears in the second category, so it's still well done, but it's not quite in the excellent category. Generally makes an appearance as well, meaning that some of the aspects of your paper might do with a little bit more consistency, for example. So let's look more carefully at these marking categories so that you have a better idea of what exactly I'm talking about. I'm only going to look at the first category in detail so that you have kind of the penultimate idea of how I make an assessment based on these categories. So what am I looking for? Well, first of all, I'm looking for, and I find this at the beginning of your paper, essentially, an excellent. By excellent, I mean well stated, clearly focused, succinct, all of those good things, and thought-provoking thesis. So it's like, I hadn't thought of that before. Wow, she took this idea and really ran with it into something that's really looking very, very interesting, and of course, clearly stated. The next thing I'm going to be looking for is a critical awareness of the effects of gender, and that they're clearly evident. So what do I mean by critical awareness? Well, everybody has their own definition of critical or criticality. Dewey wrote way back in 1910, he gave a really good definition, I think, that critical thinking, or what he called reflective thinking, is the active, persistent, and careful consideration of any belief or supposed form of knowledge in light of the grounds that support it. It's sort of the kind of thing that you've been doing in the forum, where you've taken some ideas in a reading and you've carefully considered them by looking at them across, varied readings, comparing your ideas with others in the group and that sort of thing. So that kind of intense reflection is reflected in the depth of knowledge that's evident in what you've written. That there's an exemplary logical flow, and I'm going to talk about that in depth in a moment. That ideas are presented very thoughtfully and with excellent insight. So what's happened up here is evident in what I see. Your ideas are written in a precise, clear, and logical manner, and the connections between supporting literature and the central ideas of your paper are clearly enunciated. So in other words, you're not just using citations and references for filler, but they are essential to your analysis. It's important that they're there. So that kind of thing is the kind of thing that I'm looking for. You've used headings and subheadings, probably headings. You may use subheadings, but they're probably not as useful in a paper of this length. But if you were writing a paper of 30 pages or something, subheadings would be more important. But they're used appropriately. They're used where they're needed to guide the reader so that I know something related but new is coming up. And throughout, you've used excellent grammar and composition. And why am I concerned about that? Because it's what fully supports your argumentation and analysis in the paper. So it really helps the reader to follow the flow of your argumentation and see where it is you're going, and to be convinced by the things that you're saying. And references and citations follow APA 7th edition format precisely. And the depth of that precisely is where I'll be ending up with the marks for that section. Okay, so I wanted to talk about logical flow because this is kind of a hard thing to explain, and yet it's so evident when I read a paper. So when you're writing a paper and you've established your thesis, and then you start looking at the readings that you've chosen around that thesis, and you start seeing ideas and so on that might be helpful to your paper. You might start jotting them down somewhere, or on your computer you're starting to put the ideas down, maybe a few quotes that support those ideas and so on, the page that you found them on, etc., etc. So you're gathering information, but so far it's in a pretty chaotic state. But as you start to gather information, you start to see that some of the ideas are linked to one another. So this idea, this idea, this idea, this idea, and this idea are linked to each other logically. They are supporting the same analysis, so to speak. So we've got, I think it's 4 categories then of ideas here. So I've got all of this information. Now I have to organize these things into something that's going to make sense in my paper. So I first of all have to decide, in these categories, how will I organize the categories? What follows on what and why? And so in thinking about that, I've organized them so that these ideas are important to establish a context, for example, for my analysis. So they're important to sit there because a reader will need that information before they can fully understand what I'm going to be talking about here. And then following from that, there are 3 themes, and those 3 themes follow on each other logically here by organizing this group of ideas first, and then this group of ideas, and then this group of ideas. So now I've got the basic outline for my paper. And now I can start to pull it all together. So once you've done all of that, then you're ready to write a paper. Now, I say that because sometimes when I read a paper, I read something that's interesting and has good ideas in it, but the writer is still at this stage. And so reading it feels chaotic. It doesn't feel like I'm following ideas in their logical sequence. It starts to not make sense, or I have to kind of think, well, didn't they talk about that a little bit earlier? How are those ideas linked? So I'm kind of trying to link them up as I'm reading through. A reader shouldn't have to do that. So if you've done this work, then you've done a lot of the work for the reader, for them to be able to capture the ideas that you're putting forward. So what do we do next? Well, first of all, then we look at, okay, when we're putting this paper together, these are the things I need to be thinking about. First of all, I might as well format it right from the beginning. So I'm going to format it to number my pages. I'm going to make sure that I've got a 12-point font and that it's an easy one to read. So for example, this over a whole paper is very hard to read, particularly when it's in small font. And so you don't want me to have to read that paper after I've read 4 or 5 others, because my eyes will be sore and I won't be happy. So 12-point font and an easy to read font like Calibri or Roman, etc. are ones, you use them in your essays all the time. And then when you set up your paper, you're going to set up a title page, and on that title page will be your title of your paper. So whatever title you come up with for it, it can be, very pragmatic, or it can be kind of creative, whatever you choose, that's fine. The course that you're writing this paper for, the date that it's due, and your name. And I implore you to put all of that information, particularly your name, and particularly number the pages, because sometimes things get, lost in a sea of submissions. And if I have nothing on that paper to suggest who that person is that wrote that paper, it becomes very difficult. So we'd have to do some sleuthing, and probably you'd rather that I was spending my time marking your paper so that you get it back sooner. So that the title page is an APA requirement, and it's something that is really helpful as well. You're going to begin your paper with your introduction to the ideas. So your introduction is kind of that, capturing the reader moment. You know, when you're doing a lesson, how you have that kind of thing that you do at the beginning that captures attention. Well, in your introduction, that's what you're going to do. You're going to cause the reader to think, wow, this is going to be an interesting paper, just because of the way in which you've introduced the ideas. And then now that I kind of know the idea area that you're going to be looking at, now you're going to tell me very clearly in a thesis exactly what it is that you're going to do in this paper, what it is that you're going to explore in this paper. So that's the first part of your paper. And then you're going to take that organization that you've done and you're going to then organize it into paragraphs and so on. Now you might end up with more paragraphs than you actually have main ideas, but let's just say for the sake of convenience that we'll look at it the way I've organized it. So and imagine this one is kind of overlapping here. I apologize for that break, that shouldn't be there. But what you want to do is you want to introduce each paragraph with what you're going to be talking about in that paragraph. So your key sentence at the beginning. And then at the end of your paragraph, you're going to try to link it in some way to what's coming in the next paragraph. So each of your paragraphs is going to take an idea and flesh it out. And you may need 1 or 2 paragraphs to do that. But still, you're going to keep those ideas together so that they flow one into the other. So your introductory sentence and your concluding sentence are key to kind of saying to the reader, this is how these ideas are flowing. And you're going to do that for each of them. So each section then is going to be handled in that way. And you may want to have a heading for each of your sections, for example, if you wish, and that will help the reader as well, because it'll say, okay, we've looked at this part of the paper, and I'm pretty clear about that. Now, having been clear about that, we're going to be looking at this, this, and this. And you might have even said that up in your thesis, for example. So you're going to work your way through the paper until you've completed all your ideas, and then you're going to pull all of those threads together in a conclusion that sort of tells me what you've said, but tells me why it was important that you said it in relation to your thesis. What do I know now, or what can I conclude about your thesis, having this knowledge that you shared with me? So that's going to be your conclusion, and so you don't just repeat what you've said, but you pull it together in a way that ties the threads together and gives me the picture that you want me to see, if that makes any sense. And then you're going to finalize your paper with references, but you're not finished yet, because the last step, and probably the most important step in many ways, is editing. And I know time is of the essence here, and you won't have a lot of time for editing, but just trust me, even a couple of passes through will catch things that otherwise you wouldn't catch. So the first thing I want you to do is read carefully and watch for punctuation, meaning, clarity, succinctness, those sorts of things. Do your sentences kind of hang together in a way that makes sense? Does the punctuation, is it where it needs to be, so that as the reader reads through, it makes sense, that sort of thing. Watching for, using commas correctly, using semicolons correctly, using colons correctly. Those are the main ones. Watch for words like this and it. Why? Well, because those words require an antecedent, so I know what this is, or I know what it is. So if it's not clear, if prior to this there are 3 or 4 different things referenced, I have no idea what this is, so the rest of the sentence and the rest of the paragraph may not make any sense to me at all, unless I know what this is. So I'm going to have to guess. And as a writer, you don't want readers guessing what your meaning is. So you need to be sure that your this and it, words like that, have an antecedent that's clear. And if it's not clear, then change the word this to the name of the person or the object or whatever it happens to be that the antecedent is that you want people to know. Do any of your sentences use a passive voice? This is kind of deadly when you're trying to convince people, or you're wanting people to kind of follow you along in an argument that you're making, that sort of thing. You don't want to sound wishy-washy. It would, you know, it would appear that blah, 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 blah. Well, you know, right away I'm thinking, well, are they sure or not? You know, what's going on here? So here's an example, and I found this online. The house was being painted when I arrived. So the object then becomes the beginning of the sentence rather than the subject who is acting. So when it's important for there to be kind of oomph to something that you're saying, and throughout your paper, basically, there's a need for that, then be clear. They were painting, or the boys were painting, or the girls were painting, or you know, my friend was painting the house when I arrived. Whoever it is doing it, do it. Say it. Say who it is. And construct your sentences as often as possible. Now, you don't want to be boring and have each sentence constructed exactly the same way. But, you know, when you have a point to be made, make it clearly and with some punch. Then read again for meaning. Do the ideas as they're presented make sense? Is there a logical flow to what I've said? Read it out loud, using the punctuation to guide you. Are sentences complete? And they sometimes are not clear that they're not complete till you actually read it out loud. Then you're reading it and you think, oh, something's missing there. And then you go back and you rewrite it so that it's clear. Did you use phrases like, I think, it seems to me, and so on? If you did, take them out. Because you shouldn't be, you're not writing an opinion paper. So what you think, what seems to you really doesn't matter here. It's what can I support with authoritative voices? And you pull those together to support your argument. So that the reader knows that when you say something, it's not just coming out of the air somewhere, but there is actual support for the claim that you're making. And I think that's everything. I hope that's helpful. I've talked longer than I wanted to, but these are the kinds of things that I run into often in papers, and I'll make a comment about them. But if you've edited it out first, I'll be really happy about that, because it's, first of all, saves me editing it. But secondly, it says, I really care about what I've written and I want to say it in the best way possible. And that's always a good thing. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions at all about your paper, you know to get in touch with me. And I'm actually really looking forward to reading your papers, because I have a class, I'm blessed with a class of very good writers based on what I see in the forum. And so in a more formal setting, I'm hoping for the same thing, and I have reason to believe that I do. And so I'm really looking forward to reading your papers and seeing the kinds of things that you've been interested in, and learning from you in reading your final papers. So take care.